Welcome everyone to this edition of the Full Circle Podcast. This is Full Circle Podcast number 7. As always, I'm one of your hosts, David Roberts, along with the OG, Dr. Neal Holmes. And out for 3 weeks, for the next 3 weeks, will be Andre Taylor. He has a previous engagement. Hopefully, when he comes back, he'll let us all know what's been going on, tell us about it. But we have a substitute, someone filling in for Andre Taylor. We're very blessed to have her. That's right, I said her. Miss Kendra Haskins. Miss Haskins, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
For the sake of our viewers, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, I have been a teacher for 6 years. I teach special education, and I have a master's in special education. I have a master's in educational leadership.
Okay, now, and that really leads us to one of the reasons I wanted you to join us, not just, but today, but for the next 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. Tell us, education is challenging enough. I think we're all educators, and we don't get compensated like we should. So education being as tough as it is, what made you decide to choose special education, which is probably the toughest component of education?
So when I first started in education, I was straight out of college, and my undergrad degree is in business. And so I had already knew I wanted to be a basketball coach. So I was coaching. And so I would work in a school as a substitute teacher. And when I was in this school, it wasn't many of me, but it was a lot of kids who was brown. It was a lot of kids who were Hispanic. And I'm like, wait. They need someone that looks like them. They need someone that, may come in with a bad hair day or come in with, sneakers and ripped jeans, and it's okay. It's not frowned upon. And I remember being a student, and I remember love walking through the hallways and seeing someone that looked like me, So that's what driven me. In that same year, I went back to school, and that's when I said I want to get my master's in special education.
Okay.
I didn't even do nothing with business, which is what in my undergrad.
I'm in the same boat. We had to have that conversation another time.
I was like, no. And I fell in love with teaching. I know that this is my purpose. I know that God put me here for these kids. I really do.
That's a beautiful thing. Now, for our viewers, Kendra and I actually work in the same school, which that school will remain nameless, and our school district will remain nameless, because these are our own thoughts that has nothing to do with our, vocation. But Kendra, one of the things I was talking to you about earlier today was a book I was reading by Dr. Umar Johnson. It's called The Psychoacademic Holocaust. And it's referred to as the special education and ADHD wars against Black boys. Now, what he is saying in his book is that Black and brown boys, but he's referring mostly to Black boys, are disproportionately categorized as special education, just because teachers cannot handle their energy. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. It's sad, but I've seen it and I've witnessed it, and it's something that I think that it plays a part in both ways. So this is what I see. I see parents who sometimes agree and say, I can't handle him. I can't handle my own child. And because we're uneducated to even do research upon it, or what this child is saying, or bringing it to a counselor, we just agree to what the teacher is saying. We just sign in papers. Until you have someone who cares enough to say, hey, it's not that, it's not nothing wrong that he can't sit still. Like, he's a child, he's a boy. Boys are not supposed to sit still. Boys are not supposed to be quiet. Even what little kid do you expect to sit still for an hour and a half class and not get up and fidget? You know what I mean? So it's that part. And then it's also another side where you have a kid who, yes, maybe he does need to get up and move, and that's okay. but because the teacher cannot handle it, it bothers the teacher. Now it's something wrong with him. You know, why can't we stand up and look out a window while we do our work? Why can't I help pass out papers? You know, it's not a problem for nobody else in the room but this teacher.
Right. I think she froze on us. All right, well, oh, you froze on us for a second. I'm glad you're back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The last thing I heard was teacher. Did you say anything after that?
I don't remember what.
Okay, you had said that it's only a problem for this teacher.
It's saying unstable, but you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. That's fine. Dr. Holmes, did you have any input?
Yeah, I have a question. There's a university here, University of Virginia, that has a school of education. They do a lot of research. And one of the things that they found in their research in terms of special education and Black boys, they found a couple of things, but one of the things they found was that the race of the teacher mattered a lot in terms of who was going to send the kid into special ed. Do you think, is that your experience, that Black teachers are more likely to keep a young man out of special ed than a white teacher?
I do.
Okay. Why do you think that's the case?
For me, it's certain, like, especially with the label ED, emotional disability. To me, that's way different from you're trying to say someone has a specific learning disability. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the issue. I can deal with you having you're going through the evaluation process and you see that he has auditory process and a phonological deficit. I can live with that. But when you're trying to label with someone with ED, that's a totally different label. It's a totally different characteristics. So my culture is different from their culture. So what I experience is different from what this white lady may have experienced. What she may think is chaotic, I may not think is chaotic. And that's the problem. We're not hiring teachers that's relatable. We're not hiring or putting people in these schools that can relate to kids. And that's the issue. They don't, we have, it's upsetting. We have teachers in our buildings that don't know how it feels to wake up hungry. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. These kids go to bed hungry every night. They wake up hungry. They don't get their first meal until they get to school. Right. When you have a teacher that don't understand that, that's a problem. I can understand why you're cranky this morning because you're hungry. Go ahead and get some breakfast. I don't care that you're late. Do you want some breakfast? Go ahead. You know what I mean? Like it's sad. It's sad. And then you have me who knows this and stands up for it, and I'm frowned upon. I get frowned upon because I'm not going to be silent on the situation. I'm going to say, no, I don't believe in that. I think that if you change displacement, let's change the teacher. Let's change the teacher. And then you got a whole nother issue, because then you have all of the Black teachers having all of the Black kids, which is unfair.
Right.
It happens. You know it happens. You want to give the kids who are brown to the brown teachers because you think that we can handle them. No, hire more brown teachers.
Now let me get into the nuts and bolts of this, and kind of and I guess what I want to talk about or get your input on is the worst case scenario, the results, because there may be people listening that say, okay, so a kid gets put in special ed and he really doesn't need to be. So what? He's going to be in a smaller classroom or whatever, going to have an easier curriculum. Mm-hmm. What is the long-term, adverse impact on not only that child, but on his community when he's incorrectly placed in special education?
I think that also depends on who's supporting the student, because special ed is a label that you can get out of. You know what I mean? Especially something that is emotional disability, because that's not your cognitive ability. You know what I mean? So if you have a goal that is something towards doing something physical, if you have somebody that's telling you, hey, you got to work towards this so you don't have this label no more, and letting them know what this means, how it's going to stop you from maybe getting a job, or maybe it's going to stop you from taking this class, it's going to stop you from maybe going to college because you're labeled as this characteristics. And if you don't have, first of all, on the paperwork, it has what the characteristics are on the OCW. So then again, if you don't have someone that's letting these kids know what you should read it to them, letting them know, hey, this is what the characteristics are. Does this describe you? You know what I mean? Is this you? And then sometimes when you hear, when a lot of them, when they don't know, which is sad, they get to high school, some of them don't even know they have an IEP. So that's a whole nother issue. So then when you finally tell them what this means, they don't know. They're hurt. This is what they think of me. This is what they look at me. Then sometimes it do flip. Sometimes they don't like that. They don't, oh my God. Some kids, when you really talk to them, they do not like having an IEP. Once they realize what it is, they really, really try to get off of it. But at the same time, if you don't have no one that's knowledgeable, someone at home saying, you know, this can end, I can delete this. The whole goal is to not have a special education teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What is an IEP? How does that factor in the whole thing?
So it's just how I can help you. So each student has their own, and it's like a plan to help the kid, but everyone's is different. What may help me be successful in the classroom may be different from Dr. Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's why each one has different accommodations. It basically just documents how your education has to be specialized to be tailored to you, so you can assess the curriculum.
Okay.
That's it.
You know, and it's funny, I can speak somewhat from personal experience. I wasn't in special ed. I was like a 3.5 high school student, but I've always learned more so by doing. I've always learned by doing. So if you're explaining something to me and you're telling me, Dave, I want you to go put this bike together, and you're saying this is step one, this is step two, this is step three, in my mind, I know I'm not going to get it until I start working on the bike. So when you're explaining something to me, I may be kind of sort of listening, but kind of halfway listening. And then I might start working on the bike and ask you a question, and you'll get frustrated with me because you say, I told you that, you know, and I've had that experience. But I know the way that I learn. It's not from reading, it's not from listening. I learn by doing. And so I think a lot of, you know, maybe students that are labeled special ed probably feel that same kind of frustration because they learn a specific way, but instead of it being celebrated, you know, it's almost like a term of derision to many people. And so I can understand where that would play into their mindset when you're a young person trying to develop your identity and trying to develop your self-esteem, you know, your sense of self. You're being told from the door, you know, maybe as early as 5th grade, 6th grade, that something is wrong with you, you know. So I can understand how that can play a part. But how does it adversely impact them in the future going into their adult life? You would say, what's a worst case scenario?
So within the individualized education program, the IEP is a part called the transition. So when you have a student who may be ED, they still may have goals, right? They may want to be in the military. They may want to be in the JROTC program. So I can document in there, hey, throughout this young man's career, we need to make sure he is in JROTC. We need to make sure that he takes the ASVAB.
ASVAB, yes.
Yep, for to be ready. So we make sure that, which I've worked with a great one at our school, just best transition plans I've ever seen. And when it's done right, it really does help kids if it's done right. But then again, you don't always have those people who have the best interest of kids.
And something I think about when you talk about that don't have the best interest of kids. I remember I was in an elementary school, and there was a young lady who she was just very spirited, to me, but she was labeled special education. So when the kids had a spelling test and there were 20 questions on the test, she only had to do 10. Okay, now that's cool, but then she's not learning those other 10 words. So then you fast forward later on in her life, and I think about something that I experienced. I grew up in a working class neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. Wasn't the greatest, wasn't the worst. So I had friends who went on. I had one friend in my neighborhood that went to West Point. I had another friend who became big with Revlon in the HR department. And then I had friends who went to prison, and I remember friends that I had, and more so were guys I grew up with, but when they went to prison, they wrote me, I wrote back. And I remember looking at those letters and thinking, wow, no wonder he probably ended up in prison. Because when you're interacting with someone every day in your neighborhood, you're not seeing anything they write. You're just talking to them, and nobody was speaking pure, proper English back then. So I didn't hear anything that would make me say, oh, this guy's not getting the education that he deserves. And then fast forward till I get those letters, I'm like, okay, now I understand what the issue was. And so I think about that, tying that into special education, a boy that's just placed in special education and didn't need to be, and almost saying we're going to get this. In many cases, not all, because there's some ups and there's a upside and a downside to just about everything. But like the case of that young lady that I mentioned, it's almost like they gave up on her. That's how I felt. And then who knows how she's going to end up later on. So, I don't know if you sound like you're looking like you want to speak to that.
I do, because I'm that teacher, because I don't feel like you have to do 20 problems to show me you know how to do them skill. I feel like you can show me in 5 problems if you can do 2 plus 2 and 6 plus, if you can do a 1-digit problem, if you can solve a 1-step equation. You can show me 5. Right. I remember in school, they used to give us like 50 problems a night to do. And it's, how the textbooks are. They all do. Right. The problems is the same type of problems over and over and over again. So I feel like even in for the general ed kids, like they legit get 4 problems for homework, and then on the quiz, it's 4 problems. You can show me on each learning target whether or not you know what you're doing.
Now, I agree that sometimes less is more, but in the case that I gave, in the example that I gave, don't you think she's like being put at a disadvantage? Like if she only does 10, I agree with you. Everybody should just do 10. But if they're giving everybody else 20 and she's just getting 10, I'm like, all right, you're not getting those same words.
It may take you 2 minutes to do it. It may take her 2 hours. Is that fair for her? That her homework may take her 2 hours and you 2 minutes?
So what would you say? So you agree with that scenario for her? Like that's how they should do it? Okay. And see, I always thought like, I always felt like she was being given up on in that instance. That's how I felt.
And that's understandable. I can see that. But I guess speaking from me, who gives that accommodation, I don't see it as giving up. I'm saying, hey, you can, to me, honestly, I have my kids sometimes, if you can tell me how to do it, that's producing it. You may not be able to write it down, but you can tell me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I always say this, and it's on my signature at school. Fair is not everybody getting the same thing. Fair is everyone getting what they need to be successful.
Getting what they need, and I've seen that. Now, Dr. Holmes, being in higher education, and I know you, when I was working in Philly, you used to complain to me that some of the kids from Philly, you weren't even talking about special ed. You just talking about the kids from Philly school, they were coming in unprepared. Yeah. But I know it's possible for students to go through high school all the way up in the special education program and then pursue post-secondary education. Because I know some that have done it.
Right.
I know a student who he was going to Community College of Philadelphia, and he failed, the English you take that's no credit,
Right.
to start off at a community college just to prepare you.
Yeah.
He failed it 7 times. And then they finally, he was a paranoid schizophrenic. Then they finally came up with the right medication dosage. And then he went on to get his bachelor's degree. So that's an example of a success story. The medication thing, that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother topic that I want to touch on. But have you seen students that came in special education? Because I know you can get somewhat of an IEP in college as well. So have you seen students that have come in special education that have gone on to be very successful?
Yeah, I've seen students who've come in, and I didn't know if they were special ed or not, but I've seen students who've come in with very low level skills, and who've really done super well, who've gone, beyond that first degree, second degree, and so forth, and gone out in the world and really have done really great stuff in the real world.
Right.
And it's a matter sometimes of not even being diagnosed for something like maybe having some kind of reading disability, or you might have dyslexia or something, some of that kind of stuff, or just never having someone sit down and work with you around the basics. Now, let's go back a few years though, before college and all of that, and I'll give you some examples of what happened with my son. All of his partners were in special ed, so he wanted to be in special ed because that's where all his friends were in special ed.
That's what we want as kids.
Yeah, all the brothers were in special ed, so that's where he wanted to be. He thought it was, hey, that's where they are. That's where I want to be, and it's a kind of a one of the things I want to know is there any administrative benefit to the school beyond racism, or why are they dumping all these young brothers in special ed? What does the school get out of it beyond just being a racist school?
Money.
Oh, okay.
It's a ticket on every head in special ed.
Okay. So with every special ed student, there's a bunch of money going with that student.
Yeah.
But they could get the same money, right, by putting
it's a set amount, but and again, I've seen where you have some it's a lot with the money in special ed. We bring in the most money.
Okay.
So
situations.
I used to work in a program where I used to recruit young African American men to become teachers. And one of the guys decided to do social work, school social work. And he came to me and he said, look, man, you don't even know what they're doing with these drugs, with these kids. They're getting kids strung out. They're getting kids on all of these drugs that they're taking, and there's funding going to the household if you get your kid on some of these drugs, and you have these young brothers who don't need this stuff, who are getting it, and they're just getting tied into this thing. Is that something you've seen?
But I think that goes to more in the homes where you have, in my cases, where you have some incompetent, parents sometimes, where again, if you're not educating yourself and reading up, you're not going to be knowledgeable on those things. And I know a lot of times I'm reached out to, even in my family, about opinions on, even if you get this label, do I have to medicate him? You know what I mean? My opinion is always, of course, not to, but every situation is different. What I don't like is the whole excuse where he don't sit still. That is, to me, the craziest thing that I have ever heard. Because it's like, well, what do you want him to do? Like, how do you want them to act? Because the next thing you're going to say is, all he do is sleep all day. He don't sit still. All he do is sit still. Because when it slows them down, it slows them down. You want them to be active. So that's where I have never, even I've only been teaching for 6 years, but I've never understood that concept. I can't wrap my hands around it, but I do know that I've seen different situations where yes, medication did level a kid out and it was fine, but sometimes you don't get that adverse effect.
Okay.
But then you also got to think the pharmaceutical companies are the biggest lobbyists to Congress. They pay Congress millions of dollars to promote, to keep the laws pharmaceutical friendly. While they're worrying about locking up people for having crack, it's like all these prescription medications that the commercials come on during the day while you're watching TV with your children. Those are the ones that are getting people into the most trouble. But Kendra, let me, I guess, play devil's advocate. Not necessarily devil's advocate, but let me say this. Like, what would you say to the person who's saying, okay, Ms. Haskins, I hear what you're saying, but if I'm a teacher, how should I handle a student that comes in that's unruly? Do I just let them be unruly? Whatever the case may be, how do I handle that?
To me, as a teacher, your expectation has to be set from day one. You cannot go, first of all, them kids know if you scared, they can smell it. So you can't be timid, and a lot of y'all is in this classroom timid and you scared of them. You're scared of their students. You cannot be scared of them. You have to treat them like people. They are humans. You should teach like how you would want someone to talk to your kids. You need someone to hold them accountable. Okay, I'm not going to lower my expectation just because you are in special ed. You are taking this class just like everybody else. Okay, yes, I'm going to give you your accommodations, but if I set the bar here, you're going to meet me there.
Right.
That's how I coach basketball. So that's me. And at the end of the day, when that bar is set and them kids know you respect them, you're not going to have that problem. You're not going to have that problem. So to me, the number one issue is your classroom management. Yes, I said it. It's your classroom management. That's what it boiled down to. And don't nobody want to talk about that. Don't nobody want to say, get your classroom management together. Don't nobody want to talk about that. Now, everything, they will make everything look good. All the little, like, to me, a lot of stuff I've seen is for show. You post these nice little assessments and assignments and stuff that you made, but what are you teaching? What relationships are you building? I can give a crap of if it took me 2 hours to do a PowerPoint. Did them kids learn from that PowerPoint?
Right.
That's that it's the classroom management.
Now, I want to touch on something you said, because you talked about being scared. I remember when I was like 7 years old, like in walking distance of my house, Randall Park Mall was built. And it was like the biggest mall in the world at the time. It's since been torn down and it was surpassed. But of course, when I was a teenager, my friends and I, we started hanging out at this mall. And what is a mall for? You shop a little bit, you sit, rest a little bit, or you go to the food court. And I can remember when we would sit, security would come and like ask us what we were doing, or like we couldn't sit down. Now that I'm older, that kind of thing doesn't happen to me, but when I was young, it happened quite a bit. And needless to say, most of the security that was coming, that viewed my friends and me as threats, did not look like us. So do you feel that there's more of a tendency for teachers that don't look like our Black boys to be afraid of our Black boys.
Mm-hmm. They are afraid of it. They are afraid of it. And how can I put it? Most teachers are even afraid of our Black females as well.
Mm.
So instead of holding them accountable, we say, oh, it's okay, and let them do whatever they want to do, because they're afraid to say, no, sit down. No, you're not going to the bathroom. You know what I mean? Where they're afraid to hold them accountable, and instead they take the friend route, which is goes back to the classroom management piece. But
So,
again, I'm sorry, it's kind of, it goes back to the cultural piece too, because sometimes, you know, how we was raised is, you know, our moms got on us. Sometimes it's sad to say, but we learn from, we not gonna change until somebody yell at us. Till I tell you to sit down. No, you're not going nowhere. Do your work. Me, you tapping me on my shoulder, it's not gonna get there. Don't nobody tap me on my shoulder at home.
Right.
Don't nobody say, hey, Johnny, it's okay. So it goes back to still, like, you know, we always do those professional developments on you know, how to relate and how to talk to each other's culture, but I don't think we really take the time to learn and apply it and apply it. And it's really unfair because we always get the short end of the stick.
you know, I read somewhere that special ed was developed, I guess, right around 1968. And that was the time when integration of the schools was just starting, you know. And so just as the schools were integrated, they needed to they were really concerned about the Black boy and the white girl. That was one of the big things that they were concerned about. But the question I have is, I have two questions really. One, how do we bring the parents into the equation, you know, and the community into the equation, um, to fight off some of the stuff that the school is doing, and and the second part is really, how do we make this a national issue, or at least a statewide issue in our various states or cities, where we can kind of really go after it and really kind of, you know, fight against this stuff and change some policies.
Um, well, first, I did not know what you said, so that was very eye-opening for me. I did not know that that's when special education was started.
Makes sense though.
It makes a lot of sense. I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm still just processing that. But I don't think we're going to see true change in any education until we have people who are educators making decisions for educators. We don't have people in these positions that are educators. So that's, to me, the number one issue. And then once we get educators in these positions who, you know, have the education in education, then you can now hire people who look like us in education, you know, to be in these positions. But we have people in these positions right now that do not have no education background making laws and stuff for us. So that, to me, we got to fix that first.
Mm-hmm.
What does the perfect system look like? The perfect education / special education system. If you could just have anything you wanted, you know, and from based on your 6 years teaching in special education, what's that perfect? Oh, I see you have something in mind already. You thought about this.
Yes. So I have always, so this is a little tangent. I'm sorry, and I answer. I always wanted to build my own school, and of course, I know that that's a lot of money, but I've always wanted to have a school, and I want my school to be a place where my kids can stay there. Like, you don't have to go home, and it's a section where they can sleep there too.
Wow.
Because I have always had kids, boys and females, that have literally like, Miss Haskins, I need food. So I'm ordering pizza, to their house. Miss Haskins, it's that time of the month. Can you please bring me some, womanly items to school? I got you. You know what I mean? So with all of that, I have always wanted to have my own school. But what it would look like in this world, I know I can't have the beds and my dream, but in a regular school that we have today, I think we need to offer what every child needs. And right now we don't have that. It's kind of hard to fund it. So say, for example, if how can I put it? In special ed, we have self-contained and we have general ed where it's co-taught. But, I feel like in certain instances where there's a kid who may need self-contained everything in all 4 content areas, and it may not be offered at that school. But because he's at that school, I now have to change that document to tailor it to this school. But in reality, if I have this student here, that school needs to offer what he needs. And that's what's not happening. And I know it's because it's a money issue and we don't have the funds to have, self-contained teachers in every area. That's the problem, or that's the response that I always get, is the funding for the special ed teachers. They don't want to pay for us to have us in the building. And that's why our caseload and our workloads are always so high. But back to my regular school, to what I need is, or what I want is just a school where no matter what the kid is, we can give them what they need, what they need, and not change it for that kid to fit the school. The school should fit the kid, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it does.
That sounds like LeBron James' school.
I want to work there.
Huh? You work there? You want to work there?
I want to.
Yeah, that you should go up there and check it out sometime.
I love him. Don't get me started. I'm gonna cry.
He just bought a apartment building, and that apartment building is for homeless kids, homeless families, and they can stay there.
Yes, and he provides funding for them. He provides jobs for the parents. Everything.
Yeah, he bought this it used to be a club, and he turned this club into like a one-stop social service thing. You go in there, and if you need a job, you go down this way. If you need health thing, it's still in the same building, but you go over that way. You know what I'm saying? And he has all of that stuff. And
I love him.
And he got the kids who have the worst chance in the city in that school. Now you got a lot of people now that people trying to get into that school. He said, no, it ain't for you. You got opportunities. This for folks who ain't got no opportunity.
I have to put that on my to-do list. I really want to. I want to. I don't even know if I'm even qualified, but I should definitely think about doing that. It's my dream.
Well, I went to college with Kendra. I'm not Kendra. That's you, Vicky McGee, who's the family liaison at this school. So. Yeah, because I went to the University of Akron. So
I'm gonna faint.
So LeBron was a young guy at that, young boy at that time.
Oh my gosh.
So I might be able to make that connection.
Gosh, I'm sweating
for you. Hey, so as we draw this one comes to a close, let me ask one more question, Kendra. What would you say to people that are just members of the general community, not just parents, but even if I'm living in a community and I don't have my own kids, I'm still impacted by how good the education system is, because the better the education system is in my community, that's one less kid that's possibly breaking into my car or breaking into my house or snatching my mom's purse, because that's somebody that has been failed by the system. So if I'm just a member of the community, what would you say to me I need to do as a member of the community as far as lobbying, as far as, trying to promote that positive education system in my community?
Be who you needed when you were younger.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Be who you needed when you were younger. And I wake up every morning,
Mhm.
and when I walk these halls for the last 6 years I've been teaching, I am who I did not have in those buildings. My students, some that are now seniors, some that have graduated, know that they can call me no matter the time or the day, and I am there.
Mhm.
They know that they can call me at 5 p.m. and I'm going to hop on this Zoom and help them with their homework. I'm going to stop what I'm doing. It may, and I get that not everyone has that time. But like you said, it could be one person. You
Mhm.
capture that one kid
Yeah.
and be who they need, because everyone needs somebody, and we all suffer from our childhood trauma, and we
Mhm.
don't know what our own kids are going through.
Yeah.
So we need to be who we needed when we were younger.
I think that's a perfect point to end on. Kendra, I want to thank you for joining us and look forward to having you for the next 2 weeks. You
Thank
know,
you
you
for having
definitely
me.
adding a fresh perspective. Um, so on behalf of myself, the OG Dr. Neal Holmes, I just want to thank you. And to the listening audience, or the viewing audience, I should say, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.